Let's talk about the education system, more specifically the higher education system. Now I'm sure we can all agree that the value of education can't be denied. And so it should come as no surprise then that education is one of the fundamental human rights as set out by the United Nations. And so in Article 26 of the United Nations Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, it states, "Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit." So what it's basically saying is that everyone should have equal access to free education. But of course, since it's an official document, it can't be that straightforward. Free education only applies to the fundamental level. So that brings me to the question of this talk: should higher education be free? And so to answer that question, we have to first analyze the pros and cons of free higher education. And so what free education entails is that regardless of financial position, all students have equal access to free or higher education. And that means that even those students with fewer financial resources and who arguably need education the most now have access to it. Secondly, free higher education would also lead to a more educated general public, which would lead to more value added to the economy due to job specialization. So let's say we make free higher education, or we make higher education free all of a sudden. Now everyone's getting more educated, people are making better decisions, everything's great, there's no downsides, right? Well, first let's look at the economics of such a proposition. Who's paying for this free education? Well, most obviously it's going to be the government who's subsidizing it, which means that the financial burden is going to be ultimately on the taxpayer. And guess what? Students are taxpayers as well. The second issue of free higher education has to do with the principles of quality and value. If there are more students in the system, it puts more strain on the educational system, which means that the quality of education may slip. As well, if there are more degrees in the job market, the value of each individual degree is diluted. Now, it's an oversimplification to call or compare education to a mere commodity, but education does follow some laws of supply and demand, and we can already see that in the job market today that there's an oversaturation of some university degrees. But there are some areas in the job market where supply does not meet demand. And one of such areas is in skilled trades. So why aren't more students applying to apprenticeships if these jobs aren't filled? I'd argue that this is a social issue, that society places less perceived value on these accreditations. And this mismatch in perceived value and actual value is also the cause of why so many students are applying to university. Society has taught us that a university degree guarantees a stable and successful future, despite what actually may occur. And so is free education really the answer, or do we just have to redefine the issue? And so I don't think the question is really whether free education or not, but the question really is, can we change our perspective of what higher education is, and how do we define its value? Thank you.